Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone. You've chosen a very exciting day to tune into the show because I'm here with the co-founder and CEO of Nebia, Philip Winter. Philip, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Jen.
You guys have a really amazing story. Can we start out with the genesis of Nebia?
Sure. The genesis of Nebia dates back to 2010, so a little more than 5 years ago. Carlos, one of my co-founders, ran a large chain of gyms in Mexico City. And Mexico City, for those of you who don't know, is at 8,000 feet. It's a city of 20 million people. So they have to pump in all of this water. And so the company it's sort of like a combination of Sports Authority and Equinox gyms in one. And so they had about 20,000 people a day showering, and water is one of their biggest concerns and highest variable costs. So that's what sparked the idea. And it was really he and at that point his 83-year-old dad, Emilio, who was a retired engineer and tinkerer, who started trying to come up with a solution to reduce water. And they landed on showers, and after 2 years of tinkering, came up with some early prototypes. And that's about when I met them. I was working at a nonprofit in Mexico called Endeavor, which helps entrepreneurs scale their companies. And Carlos and Emilio, I met them, and they showed me the prototype and invited me to their house. And so I went to their house and took a shower, and was really convinced that there was something pretty special here. And at that point, it was an ugly prototype, just sort of like PVC, plastic, but it conveyed the experience. And so we started working together. This is August 2013, with the idea being that, hey, we could take this one of two ways. We could either take it to a nonprofit route and take it to parts of Africa and Latin America where water is a really big deal, and sanitation is also just as important. Or we could take it to the top of the pyramid and make this about changing how people experience water and changing how people think about showers on a much higher level. We thought maybe if we do that, we can change people think about water sort of the very high end and launch a movement. Really, we like sort of design-oriented products, we like the same brands, and so that's what we set out to build. And a few months later, we came back out to Palo Alto on like a prospecting trip, and we installed the prototype in our hotel room. And we had a few design firms come take a shower, and that was sort of our first meeting. And a few months after that, we moved out here, not really knowing anybody, with sort of this humble ambition to do a Kickstarter campaign and try and sort of raise some noise about it. And we'd just basically take coffee with whoever would talk to me about their showers. And so 1 in 10 meetings would lead anywhere, but that 1 out of 10 meetings really made the difference. And we were able to land pilots at Equinox gyms and at Google and at Apple and at Stanford. And that's when we really started to get traction. And we met our first investors that way, and we just iterated constantly between each pilot. And we got, in 2.5 months, we got 200 or 300 people to take a shower. And so it was a pretty sizable critical mass of people to give you feedback. And we've been running with it ever since.
I think that's something that, in reviewing everything that's happened for you guys, especially most recently with all of the press, what has stood out to me is your ability to think big and have a vision, but also go where opportunities and life leads you. Coming out to San Francisco, you didn't intend to participate in Y Combinator, but you did, and you got there and they wanted you to launch 2 months earlier. What was that experience like?
Yeah, being a startup that has, doesn't really have software or electronics in the traditional sense, we weren't as attuned to Y Combinator. And it was when we brought on our third co-founder, Gabe, who we met at a really critical point. Right at the end of 2013, we met and we brought him on to do a consulting project for us. He was working at Apple at the time. And he's the one that sort of was really keen on doing Y Combinator. And I had seen a lot of their how to start a startup classes and really believed in the philosophy of how they think about companies at an early stage. And so we applied, just sort of, we had a friend or two who had done it, and they strongly recommended it. And then when we got the interview, we were like, okay, we should really pay attention to this. And we went into the interview, and they out of 7,000 companies, they interview 400 or 500. So it was a pretty narrow funnel. And they do 10-minute interviews. And based off of that 10-minute interview, they decide whether they're going to fund you or not. And they fly everybody in. And so the day before, we asked, hey, can we bring our prototype and install it? And they said, yeah, sure. So we get there early, and we install it in their bathroom at their office. And fortunately, that meant that they were going to do our interview in a different room. So we did it right in the hallway, right outside the bathroom, so as to not lose any time. which was great because it meant that like the partners at YC could sort of change room a little bit and change their setting. And so we sit down and there's 5 partners on the other side of the table, and 3 or 4 minutes into the interview, Sam Altman stands up and he's like, okay, I'm gonna take a shower now. And we all look at each other and we're like, what do you mean you're gonna take a shower? Like, we didn't even bring a towel. Like, all we had was like a hand towel, like a dirty hand towel. And he's like, yeah, I'll use that. So he went and took a shower during our interview. And as a result, our interview ended up going like double the time. And
I was going to say, did you time him? Or?
Yeah, no, we did. I mean, we didn't, but they came in, knocked, the time was over, and we went like double. But that proved to us that like this was like a phenomenal community of people who were really going to roll up their sleeves and help us. And it was an incredible experience. As you mentioned, we had like a 4.5 month timeline to launch our Kickstarter, and we reduced that to like a month and a half. And we basically categorized everything we needed to do, like nice to have versus need to have. And we just did the need to have, and we just cranked on it. And it was really like it instilled such a like intense amount of focus that you need at that stage, because there's so many things you could be pursuing, but you can't. Right? You only have to pursue the things that are like essential to get you to where you're trying to go. And so it was a great experience. We really look back on it very fondly, and they're still really pretty closely in touch with the alumni community.
When they first said that you should launch earlier, was your initial reaction like, what? Like, we got a roadmap here.
Yes, and like, no, come on, you don't get it. Like that, yes, you can launch software and write code and send an update, but you can't do that with hardware. Like once you launch, you're set. Like making changes takes a long amount of time, if you can even do it. And I remember a couple of partners said it to us. Luke Eisman, who's the head of hardware there, and Kevin Hale. And it was when we met with Kevin Hale, he was just like, just launch. You've got a prototype now. Just put it on your website. And so for like 10 days, we opened up a payment portal through Stripe on our Squarespace website, and we got our first 10 sales. And it was all YC partners and some like YC founders. But it was amazing to see like the dollar signs actually, come in. It was like, $2,000 in sales or something. But it felt amazing. We said, wow, people are actually going to put their money down for this, right? Because it's a totally different sign to have people say they would be interested in buying it to actually, putting down their credit card and being charged. And then we committed to that plan and just stuck by it.
And as you kind of shifted gears to accelerate, what kind of conversations were you having with your team to make sure that, you're moving fast, but you're also not missing things?
I mean, we had a weekly sort of Gantt chart that we all looked at and said, okay, these are the things that need to happen in this sequence, right? We need to finish the prototype stage so we can commit to these designs and build a prototype that's going to be ready to launch. And so over the course of a month and a half, what we had to do essentially was, on the product side, we had to get a functioning prototype that looks like what we're going to ship to our backers, which obviously the most difficult task. That had to happen before we could film certain scenes of the video and take product photography, which are like the most important assets for a Kickstarter campaign. We had to build a website from scratch, and we worked with a firm to help us do that. And they did a great job. And we had to build a little bit of hype and buzz. And so get in touch with some press contacts and then get some influencers to try it and tweet about it. And we were actually going to launch a week before we did. And then last minute, there were some delays on the prototype. And so we ended up having to delay it by a week. But it's amazing when you set a deadline, even if it's an artificial deadline, and everybody focuses on that, how you can achieve things. And that's one of the things that YC sort of does in being a 3-month program with a very definitive end, which is demo day, where you pitch to a room of 400 investors. It gives you this artificial sort of sense of this must happen by this time, right? It's like do or die. I don't think you can sustain that for your life because you will sort of run yourself into the ground. But cyclically, I think that gives you the right sense of urgency to really focus and hone in on what's important and do things that are really great. And like we achieved far more than we could have ever imagined in that period of time.
And at the time, were you the 8 team members that you are now?
No, we were 4 and 5, more or less, for the majority of that time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So everyone is really just a department of one.
Yes. And everybody is going to Bed Bath & Beyond to buy new towels when we run out of towels, is taking out the trash. The night that we launched, we all slept here, and we spent the whole weekend here, 2 weekends before that. We have pictures of everybody sort of, nestled up on the ground, taking turns sleeping.
What is, when you look back on that experience, what's one of the highlights, just a fun highlight?
Um, so much had to happen in the 10 days before launch, right? You have to understand, we've been working on this on some form or another for 4 or 5 years.
Years.
Um, and Kickstarter has been a goal for at least the last like 2 years leading up to that. And so there's a lot of like build up and hype towards this one event. And it's like, it's going to make or break, the launch of this company. And so there's a lot of sort of expectation weighing on it. And the 10 days leading up to it, which is when everything critical had to happen, we had to get the prototype. Our supplier in Minnesota told us it was impossible. And then there was miscommunication. And then they said they had shipped it, but they shipped the wrong thing. So we had to LinkedIn the CEO so we could get like sort of the right level of importance, focus on it. And fortunately, he responded to my message and like fast tracked everything. And every day we had to do the shooting, do the film shooting, do the photo shooting, show it to our investors, show it to the press. So we had like 7 people from the press shower in it. The way that we all sort of had each other's back during that week of like, hey, this is make it or break it for us. And you sort of fine tune the communication and, of a team so that when that sort of period comes where there's not enough time to explain everything, everybody just sort of knows what needs to happen. And to give you an example, there was the second to last night, I went home and slept, and everybody was home sleeping, and there was Marie, who's on our marketing team, and Corey, who's one of our R&D engineers. They were helping to write the content for the Kickstarter campaign page, and they write at it from 2 completely different angles. Corey writes at it from a very sort of structured engineering perspective, and Marie is sort of the marketing language, making it really approachable. And when I left, they were button heads totally, and I said, "This is when I've got to leave and just let them work it out." And I went home and slept from like 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., got back to the office. And from them butting heads, they were like laughing. They had finished the whole page and had somehow worked it out. It was really cool to see that. And it's particularly something so important to our sort of launch, which was in 2 days later.
I'm glad that you mentioned the way that you guys crafted the launch, because as I was telling you and looking at all of this, I'd learned about Nebia a while ago. My dad shared with me. I checked out the site and I loved it. And then when I really dove in and I looked at your site, I looked at the Kickstarter, I watched the video a couple of times. The technology of what you're doing is incredible. And I want a Nebia. I can't wait to shower.
Mm-hmm.
But what I loved is the way that I felt like I knew you guys and you were talking just to me, not the millions of other people, just to me. How did you achieve that?
Well, first of all, thanks for saying
that. No problem.
Something that we've thought about since early on is that we want to build a brand and a movement that connects with people on a very sort of personal level, right? We're dealing with water, which is this sort of most basic, element. Everybody interacts with it every day. Everybody depends on it every day. And what we're doing is really sort of transcending that we're just building a cool product, right? That's just a part of it. A cool product that works really well and is thoughtfully engineered and designed. The purpose of Nebia is to change how people think about water in their daily lives. The way we do that is by building great experiences and great products. We really tried to craft the message around that. And so Carlos, one of my co-founders, who is really the brand guru and marketing guru, and he loves that stuff, he created the story arc of the video. And we looked at a template that a woman named Nancy Duarte has. She's the best person in terms of making presentations and makes all of the keynotes for big companies. And she's got this idea around fluctuating great presentations between what is, which is the down, which is sort of the current state of things, and what could be, sort of the hopeful, what you plan to bring to the world. What is and what could be, what is and what could be. So he made this whole story arc for the video, and we crafted the sort of the language for the video and what we wanted the mood to be throughout it. So there was this sort of intentional back and forth brainstorming of how we were going to do that. And we just try to tell the story how it is too, and we've had the good fortune to talk with hundreds of people, literally, who come to our office, get naked, take a shower, come out and tell us their experience, right? And the bathroom is right over in that wall. And so they literally walk out into the whole office, right? And so we've learned how to talk about Nebia by talking to lots of people, and we've learned how they react to it. And so I think that's helped. Is from the beginning, there's been a very sort of human element to it.
And I didn't even realize, like I mentioned until you said that, it's very uncomfortable. You generally don't even see your family when you come out of the shower and your hair is pasted to your face and you look terrible.
Yeah.
So to come out with people you don't know, if you weren't welcoming from the beginning, I A, wouldn't take a shower, or B, I would not come out.
Yeah. Yeah. At first, it was far harder to convince people to come. So at first, I was working out of my house, and so I had to convince people to come to my house
Oh God.
to take a shower. And so that's part of the reason why I live in Soma, is to convince people that it's sort of like an office type location, a live work situation. It was a big deal. It was a big deal to get an office, and so like that's a little bit less, a little bit less daunting, right? To go over to somebody's office, take a shower versus their house. Now we're in the fortunate situation where a lot of people have heard about Nebia, and they're more than happy to come. Recently, we had a group of like 25 MBA students from Morton come take a shower, and they all sort of came out and gave their experiences, and we talked in small groups. Yeah, I think everybody can relate to a shower on some level. So everybody does it every day, and so I think that's what's made it sort of approachable for people.
And I think in the video as well as on your site, what I ended up identifying with is exactly that. The things that happened to me. There's a little girl when she's coming out of the shower and her Band-Aid gets caught. That happens to everyone when they're getting out of the shower.
That's
And
Carlos's daughter.
really?
Yeah.
That is awesome. And then, so you mentioned that, and I can identify there. And then you have an adult getting into the shower, and she's talking about how her best ideas come during the shower. And I thought that was really interesting because it makes it such a more intimate experience, because it's true. That's when you're in the shower and you're, aha, I figured it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when you start talking to people, you realize a shower means a lot of different things to people. And for everybody, the one thing that's in common is that for everybody, it's like the one moment where they're totally unplugged, disconnected, and alone. Right? It's like in the bathroom, starting their day or ending their day. Some people like to take like 20, 30-minute showers and like decompress and think about their day. For others, it's a quick sort of, in and out efficiency thing. When you really start to ask, people are really keen to sort of tell you what it means to them, is it brings them back to that experience. And some people are really passionate about it and others are less passionate, but for everybody, there's this sort of personal connection to it, right? And they're sort of by themselves, they're naked, they're most vulnerable. For most people, it's the first thing they do in the day, so it's how they start their day. And so that's really what we try to hit on. It's like, hey, a shower can mean many different things to different people, right? And that's why we had Jay on there, who's an Airbnb host in San Francisco. Like for him, it's about providing the experience to his guests, right? And there's the consequence of, hey, the longer people shower, you do start to notice it on your water bill.
When it comes to relating to individuals, whether it's in the product or in the marketing, what really stands out in the way that you communicate with them?
I think we're in the fortunate situation that we can relate to people on a few different levels. And we've been aware of that since early on. On the one hand, it's the experience element, right? A shower is sort of first and foremost an experience, and it should be a good experience, a warm, sort of, welcoming sensation. Other people care about the design aspect, right? They're interior designers, or they like to have items that sort of stand out in their home. And so we sort of hone in on that aspect as well, in the photography that we take, in the fact that we try to keep it sort of very simple, clean lines. You can see a mock-up of it on our wall there. And then for others, and perhaps where it most resonated early on, is the fact that we are in some way enabling people to do something every day about the situation with water, which in California is so pressing. And everybody sort of has some degree of consciousness about, hey, we need to have more sustainable lives if we're going to continue to inhabit this planet. And water just happens to be a very pressing issue. And then there was also sort of the economic incentive. So we were fortunate to have like 3 or 4 main selling points, but we were really cognizant of the fact that we couldn't highlight all of those. And so we had to pick like 1 or 2 that were key. And so that's why we started the landing page, is just about the experience, right? It's this like compelling photograph, if you go to Nebia.com, of like most of the screen is filled up with water. It's about the experience. And the design speaks for itself because it's a photograph. And then right below that is the water savings. You can save 70% of water. And if that got you intrigued, you could continue to read more and find information about how you save money, etc. But you had to distill it down into one or two ideas. And we learn that through talking to people, right? And pitching it every day, whether it was in the pilots or if it's talking to our lift line drivers, that sort of thing.
When it came to some of the early pitches, your first investor was Tim Cook, Apple's CEO. What did it feel like to sit down with Tim Cook and say, hey, do you want to go take a shower?
He was incredibly generous in his feedback. And so, it was a pretty cool situation to be able to meet him and then to see that he was interested in it. And not only for the potential it could have, but liked the experience as a consumer, right? And could sort of see, beyond a very rough prototype. And so he gave a lot of feedback, and we sort of went back to the drawing board and worked on it pretty frantically and showed him a new prototype, and that's sort of how we kept it going.
And as you kept that conversation going, you've mentioned that he's imparted some insights to you on how to build a long-term company. Are there any of those that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. We really want to build a company over a 20 or 30-year horizon. We don't have any intention to sell the company in the near term. We enjoy sort of the process of building a company that can have real influence over the world, right? And if in 10 years, everybody in the world is showering with a technology similar to Nebia's, right? Not necessarily Nebia's, but something that we have influenced in some way, then we'll pat ourselves on the back and say, wow, we've really made an impact. And so Tim Cook's advice has really been around focus. I guess similar to Y Combinator, really focusing on the product and saying product is king, right? Right now we've truly sold more or less 12,000 units, which will be going out to people later this year. If we can delight them and consider that a brochure that's going into their home, if we can delight them and get a high percentage of those people to be really excited about the unwrapping, the installation, living with it for the first few days, that will multiply itself, significantly. And so just focus on the customer, on the product, on their experience, and everything else sort of falls into place after that, right? It's far easier to get sales and to convince people to try it if people are really loving the product. And so every time that we've met, we've spent at least 3/4 of the time just talking about the product. What materials are you going to use here? How are you going to manufacture it? What are the implications of that? That's really been sort of his focus.
I'm glad that you mentioned that it's like a brochure because it immediately made me think of Casper. I think most of the reason people love Casper is because they get the box and they can record a video of themselves unwrapping it and, being a part. And that was something that I was even shocked of, people who tested Nebia posting pictures of hey, I just got out of the shower. I can tell you one thing, I would never post a picture with. How do you foster that continued conversation with them to kind of acknowledge that they did it and they're sharing it with their friends?
That's sort of the next step we have to figure out. And so we've got a bunch of ideas for how we plan on doing that. One thing we've seen, which has been really cool at this point, is that there's a huge element of word of mouth, right? People love to talk about sort of new products that they have, particularly if they're experiential products, and if it's something that you can show to people. And a shower is sort of hard to do that because you can't really take it with you. But it's certainly something you can show off when someone comes to your home, right? And the moment you get someone into your bathroom, all of a sudden you sort of crossed a level of intimacy. And so I think for us, word of mouth is going to be everything, right? People really raving about their experience. And I think there'll be some group of people who are more than willing to photograph or video their installation or them trying their first shower. Obviously keeping it appropriate. But I don't know if you know who Robert Scoble is, the his famous Google Glass episode in the shower. I've actually been to his house and installed Nebia in his house. And so, there's an element of lightheartedness that you can bring to it because of the fact that it's a shower.
I love it. And I want to spend just a couple more minutes, Philip, before we go kind of talking about the journey for you. What surprised you?
A lot of things have surprised me. The first thing that comes to mind is, so I'm originally from the East Coast, and I lived in Mexico City, and I made my way here to Silicon Valley in San Francisco after that. There's something really special about this place in terms of people's openness and willingness to help. When I got here, I knew 3 people from college who lived in San Francisco, and that was it. And through that, over the course of a couple of months, was able to build a pretty great network. Really just because people were willing to help and make introductions. And I had a pretty crazy idea, a shower that saves water. Like, come on, this is a land of apps and consumer software. The number of people who went out of their way to make introductions, to help me, to give me their feedback, and sort of not waste their time or my time in doing so, like just immediately off the bat. Or if they weren't interested or didn't think they could help, they would say so off the bat. There's something to that creates this very sort of fast, iterative, dynamic and ecosystem and that's part of the reason why the Bay Area has fostered so much innovation. And we knew that. I mean, we made the decision in moving here. We said, if we want this to reach the world, it has to be somewhere where we can actually, be in touch with the best talent and people who are open to new ideas. And that was proven, pretty quickly within a month or 2 of having moved here.
And as you embarked on that journey, I mean, even moving in itself is a big deal, but moving and launching a company and launching a Kickstarter campaign, so many things happen and we learn lessons along the way. One of my favorite quotes is from Fred Wilson, and he said that, some lessons you have to learn the really, really hard way. Get knocked down, pick yourself back up, and win the round. What's a lesson you had to learn the hard way, but it's just been instrumental for you?
Yeah. I'll get a good example of that. We did a pilot at Apple, at the campus down in Cupertino. And it was the second or third major pilot we'd done. We'd done one at a gym, we'd done one at Google, and each one had gotten better. We'd iterate on the prototypes, and I had a new prototype that I thought was better for Apple. And the results were significantly worse. Like getting people who come to your face and tell you, I really don't like your product is really tough. It's really hard to swallow that. And then put on a smile and ask, well, why? Tell me about it. When you really just want to kick them out the door and never see them again.
Nothing.
Particularly if it's time after time, and then you get people who say it's great, and you're like, what do you mean? You didn't see that guy? He just loved it, right? Or talk to him. That's really tough. But through that, there's an immense amount of learning, right? And it's not personal. People being that brutally honest with you is the best thing that can happen to you, because either you're wasting your time or you need to figure out how to get it better. That was really tough, but that was a low moment, and for the first couple of times that happened, we could sort of iterate and make, changes, make it a little bit better. And then it reached a point where I sort of maxed out on my capacity to make the product better from a mechanical standpoint. And that was when I met Gabe. And so it was perfect timing. And he took the engineering and the R&D sort of a much higher level, and had sort of a new swath of ideas. And so as an entrepreneur, it sort of forces you to find a solution, right, in any way that you can.
I think that's a great one and leads right into the next question of, whether it was personal or professional, it doesn't even have to be during your time at Nebia. What's the best feedback that you've ever received or, observed the way someone lives that influences you?
I think it's related to Nebia and to bigger life advice. On a couple of key decisions we've had to make, we asked Tim Cook for advice. And each time he said, follow your gut or follow your intuition. It always knows what's right? And so analyze the situation left and right, consider all the facts. But at the end of the day, your intuition is generally going to be the one that best guides you. And I'm sort of naturally make decisions that way. So it's sort of easier for me to take that. But to hear that from someone who runs the biggest company in the world and makes sort of critical decisions on a daily basis that could have very big implications was really reassuring. And you have to make decisions really quickly when you run a company. And so to have that sort of, guiding me to say, okay, you should listen to that. That's left a huge impression on me.
I love it. All right, last 3 questions, and these ones don't have to do with work or serious life advice. If you could teleport anywhere right now, the time machine is outside the office, where would you teleport to?
To a different era?
You can teleport to a different era, a different place.
I would go somewhere skiing. Powder Day, Bluebird, top of a mountain. I love to ski, so that's what I would do. I love to be in the outdoors.
If you were a song, what song would you be?
That's a good one. The only song that comes to mind is Adele's Hello.
I love that song. I feel you. And it's like when you're in the midst of work and you come out of it, it's exactly how you feel. Like, is the
Yeah.
world still going
And
on
it's like
around
super
you?
hopeful, yeah.
All right. Last one, Philip. What's one question that you've always wanted to be asked, but nobody's ever asked you?
I think genuinely, like, why did you start this company, right? Or what motivates you to run the company?
No one has asked you that?
Genuinely, right?
So, I mean, what was the authentic reason? Like, what drives you, I guess?
There's always an answer of, you see an opportunity or you sort of came across a cool product and sort of how it came to be. But for me, what most excited me about it was meeting Carlos and understanding that we both had a similar vision for how we wanted to shape the world. I think a company is really a means to sort of influence the world. And you can do that through the products and services, but there's no more meaningful way to do that than through the culture that you build, right? And that for me is what's most exciting, like to build an environment of people and environment that's both nurturing and challenging. But nothing else will impact the lives of the people that work with you more than the company they work with, right? Because they'll be there for 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day. It won't be anywhere else for more time. That for me is the biggest responsibility and the most exciting part. You can impart a certain worldview that is like healthy, inspiring, like challenging. That's what's most exciting to me. And then, look, I happen to love the product. I care about doing something that has an implicit sort of social impact. And that's what my other jobs had been. And so that all aligned. But it was this focus on, hey, let's build a culture that really impacts people.
I love it. Now I'm going to have to hold you to another interview where we talk about culture.
Okay. Still, I got a lot to learn.
Well, it was such a pleasure to spend time with you today, Philip. How can everyone stay up to date with you and stay up to date with Nebia?
Yeah, you can visit us on our website, nebia.com, and sign up for updates. We'll be launching a blog in a couple of weeks, so you can look out for that. And you can always follow us on Twitter and Facebook, where we're pretty active at Nebia. And if you have any questions for me, you can always email me at philip@nebia.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenna. This was a pleasure.